My name is Rachel Morgan, and I'm 38 years old. Up until last fall, I would have told you that I understood marriage. I believed it was about showing up, even when it wasn't glamorous, about choosing stability when excitement faded, about protecting each other, especially in front of family. I believed that if you built something carefully, brick by brick, it wouldn't collapse overnight. I was wrong. I didn't lose my marriage because of cheating rumors or screaming matches or some dramatic betrayal you could see coming. I lost it quietly, politely, in a room full of people who smiled while it happened. And the worst part? I walked into it thinking I was being celebrated. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 9 years. We lived in Chicago, in a condo I bought years before we met. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Bills paid, groceries stocked, plans made months in advance. I thought that meant something. I thought we meant something. A few weeks before our anniversary, Daniel told me he wanted to do something special, bigger than usual. He said 5-year anniversaries were for couples, but 9 years deserved something more grown up. He suggested a nice restaurant downtown, white tablecloths, valet parking, and then he added something that made me pause. He wanted his parents there, his sister, her husband. It felt strange. Anniversaries had always been just us, but he sounded enthusiastic in a way I hadn't heard in months. I told myself that was a good sign. I wanted to believe he was trying again. I wanted to believe we were turning a corner. So I said yes. I bought a new dress, took extra time getting ready. I even rehearsed what I'd say when we toasted. Something about resilience, about choosing each other even when things got hard. I walked into that restaurant believing I was stepping into a moment that would reconnect us. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. If you've ever trusted someone completely, a spouse, a partner, even a family member, and later realized they were planning something behind your back, I want you to pause here for a second. Share your experience in the comments. You're not alone, even when it feels like you are. And if stories like this matter to you, stories told from the side of the person who didn't see it coming, subscribe to this channel. Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just end my marriage. It changed how I understand loyalty, family, and power. When I arrived, Daniel's family was already seated, laughing, drinks in hand. I wasn't late, if anything, I was early, but there was already a rhythm at the table I hadn't been invited into. His mother kissed my cheek and commented on my dress. His father raised his glass and said, "To family." Everyone clinked. I joined half a second late, the first crack forming somewhere behind my ribs. Daniel smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being sensitive, that this was just nerves. I had no idea that within minutes, the word anniversary would stop meaning what I thought it meant. And I had no idea that the people sitting across from me, people I had hosted, supported, and defended for years, were about to watch my life fracture without blinking. Before that night at the restaurant, my marriage didn't look broken from the outside. It looked ordinary, steady, the kind of life people describe as comfortable when they mean not dramatic enough to gossip about. Daniel and I met in our late 20s, both working long hours, both tired of dating apps and half promises. He was charming in a quiet way, not flashy, not loud. He liked routines. I liked planning. It felt like we fit because we wanted the same things: a calm life, a safe home, a future that didn't feel like a gamble. When we got married, I already owned my condo. I'd bought it after years of saving, before I even met him. Daniel moved in with me after the wedding. It made sense financially. He said he appreciated my stability, said it made him feel grounded. At least, that's what he said back then. Over the years, I became the default problem solver. I handled the bills, scheduled appointments, remembered birthdays. I was the one who smoothed things over when his sister made passive-aggressive comments or when his mother asked pointed questions about money that weren't really questions at all. I told myself that was what partnership looked like. One person carries more weight at times, the other catches up later. I kept waiting for later. When Daniel seemed distant, I asked questions instead of making accusations. When he came home quiet, I cooked his favorite meals. When he spent more time on his phone than talking to me, I told myself everyone goes through phases. I suggested counseling gently, framing it as something we could do together, not something he was doing wrong. He agreed to go. 3 sessions. That was it. After that, he said therapy felt forced, said it was digging up problems that didn't really exist, said we were fine. Fine became one of those words that started to hurt more every time I heard it. His family noticed the change before I did, or maybe they noticed and didn't care. His sister would make comments about how I was too structured, too predictable. Once, half joking, she said Daniel needed someone who made him feel alive. I laughed it off. I didn't want to be that wife who took everything personally. But slowly, something shifted. Not all at once, just enough that I began questioning myself. Was I boring? Was I too serious? Was stability just another word for dull? I started shrinking without realizing it. I stopped suggesting trips I wanted to take because Daniel said they were impractical. I stopped inviting friends over because he complained it disrupted his routine. I adjusted myself around his moods, telling myself it was temporary, that marriage required flexibility. What I didn't realize was that flexibility, when it's one-sided, turns into erosion. By the time he suggested that anniversary dinner, I was already tired in ways I didn't have words for yet. Still hopeful, still trying. I told myself that if he was planning something special, if he wanted family there, maybe this was his way of reconnecting, of acknowledging what we had built. I didn't know that while I was planning outfits and toasts, Daniel was planning an exit. And I didn't know his family wasn't coming to celebrate us. They were coming to witness me being replaced. Looking back now, there were signs, small ones, a distance in his eyes, a reluctance to make future plans, conversations that felt like they ended just before the truth. But when you love someone, you don't interrogate every silence, you trust. That trust was the most expensive thing I ever gave away. The restaurant Daniel chose sat right off the river, all glass and soft lighting, the kind of place people pick when they want an audience without admitting it. Valets lined the curb. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished wood, low music, white tablecloths so crisp they felt ceremonial. I remember thinking, this is nicer than usual. I remember feeling a small, cautious optimism rise in my chest. Daniel's family was already there when I arrived. His parents sat side by side, wine glasses half full. His sister leaned into her husband, laughing at something I hadn't heard. I checked my phone out of instinct. I wasn't late. If anything, I was early. "Hey," I said, smiling as I reached the table. "Sorry if I—" "You're fine," Daniel cut in quickly. He didn't stand, didn't touch me, just smiled that thin smile again. We were just getting started. Something tightened in my stomach. We ordered drinks. Small talk floated around the table like smoke. Traffic, work, housing prices. His mother commented on my dress. His sister raised an eyebrow at the menu and joked about how fancy the place was, like we didn't usually come to places like this. We had been here before. She knew that. I waited for Daniel to reach for my hand, for some acknowledgement that this night was about us. 9 years, almost a decade. Instead, he stayed angled toward his family, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of. Then, halfway through the appetizers, Daniel reached down beside his chair. He placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. The sound it made when it hit the tablecloth was soft, polite, but it landed in my chest like a gunshot. I stared at it, then at him. "What's that?" I asked. "Open it," he said. The table went quiet, too quiet. I suddenly became aware of everyone watching me, not with concern, but with anticipation. His sister's eyes were bright, his mother's lips pressed into a thin, controlled line. I slid my fingers into the envelope. My hands felt numb, like they belonged to someone else. Inside was a stack of papers, legal papers. My name, his name, and the words "separation agreement" printed neatly at the top. For a moment, the room tilted. "You're serving me separation papers," I said slowly, my voice sounding far away even to me. At our anniversary dinner. Daniel didn't flinch. I wanted to do it somewhere public, somewhere you wouldn't make a scene. His sister laughed, actually laughed. Oh my God, you should see her face. I looked back down at the papers. Division of assets. He wanted the condo, the car, a share of my savings, things I had paid for long before he ever showed up. His father lifted his glass. To new beginnings, he announced. They clinked their glasses. They smiled. Something inside me snapped into place, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, cleanly, like a switch flipping. "You've been planning this," I said, looking at Daniel. "Yes," he replied, no apology, no hesitation. "And you brought your family to watch?" His mother leaned forward. "We're here to support him. This is a big step." "A big step?" I repeated. "We're married." "Not for much longer," her sister murmured, smirking into her wine. Daniel sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "I haven't been happy, Rachel. You're stable, you're fine, but I don't want fine anymore. I want more. More excitement, more freedom, more life." His family nodded along like this was a reasonable business decision. That's when I understood something with terrifying clarity. They didn't just approve of what he was doing, they had rehearsed this. I picked up the pen resting beside my plate. Daniel blinked. "What are you doing?" I signed every page, every line. No questions, no arguments, no bargaining. When I finished, I stacked the papers neatly and set the pen on top. "You're not going to fight this?" he asked, unsettled for the first time all evening. I leaned in close, my voice calm and low. "No," I said, "because you just ended the only stability you ever had." I stood, placed the small wrapped gift I'd bought him beside his untouched drink, and smoothed my dress. "Enjoy your celebration," I said. Then I walked out. Behind me, their laughter stalled. Forks paused midair. Glasses hovered without clinking. For half a second, they didn't know what to do without me playing my part. And that was the moment they realized the script had changed. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. The city lights blurred at the edges as I walked to my car, my heels clicking too loudly on the pavement. I don't remember getting inside. I don't remember starting the engine. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached, staring straight ahead while my reflection trembled in the windshield. I didn't cry. Not then. I drove home in silence, replaying the way they had raised their glasses over the ruins of my marriage, the way Daniel's sister had laughed, the way his mother had looked relieved, like something inconvenient had finally been handled. When I unlocked the door to my condo, the space felt unfamiliar, not empty, wrong, like the air itself had shifted while I was gone. I stood in the living room with my coat still on, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside. Normal sounds from a life that had just been dismantled. Above the couch hung our wedding photo. Daniel and I were smiling at each other, young and certain, like people who believed the future was a straight line. I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for something. Anger, grief, even nostalgia. Nothing came. I lifted the frame off the nail and set it face down on the dining table. Not dramatically, not angrily, just finished. That night, I slept on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling until morning. When my alarm went off, I turned it off and lay there, letting the weight settle in my chest. 5 years of marriage, 9 years together, reduced to a stack of papers and a toast to new beginnings. Happy anniversary. The messages started before I even got out of bed. A text from an unknown number. "His sister can't believe how you acted. So dramatic." Blocked. Another message, this time from her mother. "We expected better from you. Daniel deserved a conversation, not theatrics." Blocked. It would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. They had orchestrated my humiliation in public, and somehow I was the one being scolded for not performing correctly. Then Daniel texted, "We need to talk about logistics." The word made my stomach turn. Logistics? Like my life was a shipment that needed rerouting. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Have your lawyer contact mine." 3 seconds later, my phone rang. "Daniel." I declined the call. It rang again. Declined.
"You're being childish," he texted. I felt the old reflex kick in, the urge to explain, to soften, to make him understand. Instead, I typed one final sentence. "I'll respond through my lawyer." Then I turned my phone face down and finished my coffee in silence. By mid-morning, I was sitting in a conference room that smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee, across from a lawyer named Michael Harris. Navy suit, calm eyes, the kind of man who listened without interrupting. He slid the separation papers across the table. "Did you read these before you signed?" "No," I said quietly. He studied me for a moment. "You had a reason?" I thought about the restaurant, the white tablecloth, the laughter, the raised glasses. He wanted it public so I wouldn't make a scene. Signing was the only power I had in that moment. Michael nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, "then this is where we get your power back." As he flipped through the pages, his expression flattened. Not angry, not shocked, professional. "He's asking for things he isn't legally entitled to." The words landed like a bruise and a blanket at the same time. "I already signed. Am I stuck?" "No," he said firmly. "A proposal isn't final. We respond with fair terms. He doesn't get to dictate reality because he brought a pen to dinner." For the first time since the restaurant, my shoulders dropped, just a little, enough to breathe. Still, when I went home that evening, the condo felt too quiet. His shoes were still by the door, his jacket still hung on the hook. I cooked dinner out of habit, enough for two, then stared at the extra plate and felt something hollow twist inside me. I packed the leftovers away and labeled them. It was easier than thinking. That night, I lay in bed listening to the city outside, feeling the full weight of what I'd lost. Not just a husband, but the illusion that loyalty was mutual.
The strange thing about regaining power is that it doesn't feel dramatic when it happens. There's no music swelling in the background, no triumphant speech. It arrives quietly, disguised as clarity. After that first meeting with Michael, my lawyer, my days started to look almost normal again. I went to work, I answered emails, I sat through meetings where people argued about deadlines and budgets like the ground hadn't shifted beneath my feet. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Michael moved fast. He reviewed bank statements, mortgage documents, car loan paperwork. Facts replaced feelings. Dates replaced memories. My life was translated into numbers and clauses and clean, unemotional language. And strangely, that helped. "Here's the reality," he told me during our second meeting. "He's asking for what you own, not what he contributed to. The law doesn't reward entitlement." I nodded, absorbing it. A few weeks earlier, those words would have terrified me. Now they steadied me. Daniel didn't take the news well. The first message came late one night. "What the hell is this?" I didn't need to ask what he meant. "It's a fair separation," I replied. "You keep what's yours, I keep what's mine." "You signed my papers," he shot back. "And now I'm clarifying terms," I wrote. "You don't get to take things you don't own." Dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "You're being petty." I stared at the word for a moment. Petty. Like stability. Like fine. "I'm being accurate," I replied. He didn't answer after that. Not that night. The following week settled into a strange rhythm. Mornings were quiet, evenings quieter. The condo felt hollow, but lighter too, like a room airing itself out after being closed for too long. I stopped bracing for the sound of his key in the door, stopped rehearsing conversations in my head, stopped wondering which version of Daniel I'd get when he came home. That constant low-level anxiety I'd lived with for months, the one I'd mistaken for responsibility, was gone. Loneliness, I realized, was heavy, but it was still lighter than humiliation. I began packing his things, not angrily, not all at once, just steadily, one box at a time. His clothes, his books, electronics he'd insisted we needed but barely used. I labeled each box neatly and stacked them in the second bedroom. I started calling it the exit room. Every night after work, I packed a little more. The repetition was calming. It felt like separating threads that had been tangled for too long. One evening, I found an old shoebox tucked on the top shelf of the closet. Inside were cards from the early years, handwritten notes, birthday messages, promises written in a younger version of his voice. I waited for grief to hit. It didn't. Just confirmation.
The man who wrote those words wasn't the man who slid papers across a restaurant table. By the third week, Michael called with an update. His lawyer is pushing back, he said. They're claiming he contributed more than the records show. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. Of course they are. We're holding our line, Michael said calmly. If they want to argue, they can argue with numbers. Judges like facts. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not happiness, not relief, something sturdier. Self-respect. That night, I walked through the condo without turning on the TV. I let the silence exist. I noticed things I'd ignored for years, the way the light hit the walls in the evening, the hum of the city below, the fact that the space felt like it belonged to me again. I didn't know what came next. I wasn't healed, I wasn't whole, but I was standing. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bending myself to make someone else comfortable. That had to count for something.
The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came slowly, like gravity doing what gravity always does, quiet, inevitable, impossible to argue with. The first sign was Daniel's silence. After weeks of texts demanding explanations, accusing me of being cold, petty, unreasonable, the messages stopped. Not because he'd found peace, but because he was running out of leverage. When people lose control, they often mistake noise for power. When the noise disappears, that's when the truth sets in. Michael called me one afternoon while I was still at work. They're changing their position, he said. In what way? They want to settle, quickly. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. What does he want now? Less, Michael replied. A lot less. Translation didn't require much imagination. Daniel was running out of money, out of family patience, and out of places to land. That same evening, there was a knock on my door. Not the polite kind, the hesitant kind. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. My stomach tightened before I even checked the peephole. Daniel. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His hoodie hung loosely on his frame, his hair unwashed, dark circles carved deep under his eyes. For a moment, just a moment, an old instinct stirred, the part of me that used to fix things. I opened the door only enough to stand in the doorway, blocking the condo behind me. "What do you want?" I asked. He swallowed. "Can I come in?" "No." "Please," he said, "I just want to talk." "You have a lawyer," I replied calmly. "Talk through him." 5 minutes, he begged, just 5. Against my better judgment, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The hallway lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unflattering glow. "I think I made a mistake," he said, his voice cracking. I waited. "I shouldn't have done it like that, at the restaurant, with everyone there." "You're right," I said. He blinked. "That's it?" "What do you want me to say, Daniel?" He rubbed his face. I felt trapped. I didn't know how to end things without... "So you humiliated me instead," I said. He winced. "I'm sorry." "It's too late for sorry." His eyes snapped up. "What does that mean?" "It means you made a choice," I said quietly. "You didn't just end our marriage. You turned it into a performance. You invited witnesses." He took a step closer. "What if I want back in?" I met his eyes, really looked at him. "You don't get to do that." "Why not?" His voice rose, desperation seeping through. "People make mistakes." "Yes, and people live with consequences." That landed. "I don't have anywhere to go," he whispered. "My sister kicked me out. My parents want me to figure it out. I can't afford my own place." "You should have thought about that before serving me separation papers over dinner," I said. "I thought you'd give me the condo," he admitted, almost ashamed. "Why?" I asked. Because you loved me." I did. Past tense. He looked like the ground had dropped out from under him. "You're cold," he muttered. "I'm clear," I replied. "There's a difference." He left without another word, his footsteps uneven down the hall. Only after the door clicked shut behind me did my hands start to shake, not from fear, but adrenaline.
2 days later, the call came from his mother. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize. Daniel is in a very bad place, she said tightly. He's staying in a motel. He's barely eating. You could help him. There it was. Not compassion, expectation. He stopped being my responsibility when he humiliated me, I said evenly. Family takes care of family, she snapped. You raised your glass when he did it. You don't get to rewrite that now. She called me cruel. I hung up. That same week, Michael confirmed the settlement. Daniel accepted the original fair terms. No condo, no car, no savings. A clean split. When the final paperwork arrived, I read it once, signed it, filed it away. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. And that was enough.
3 months after the anniversary dinner, the night that cracked my life open, I realized something surprising. I wasn't replaying it anymore. The restaurant, the envelope, the laughter, the raised glasses. For weeks, those images had looped in my mind like a warning siren. But one morning, as I stood in line at my favorite coffee shop, waiting for my usual order, I noticed the absence of that noise. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. My life wasn't magically better. I wasn't healed or glowing or suddenly grateful for the pain. I was functional. I went to work, I cooked simple meals, I slept through the night more often than not. The condo felt different, less like a battlefield, more like a room that had finally finished holding its breath. I painted the living room a soft green, a color Daniel once said felt too calm. I bought a new couch, one I liked. I set a single candle on the coffee table and let it burn in the evenings without worrying who might complain about the smell. Piece by piece, the space became mine again. People asked questions. They always do. Some whispered, some were blunt. Do you feel bad for him? Don't you wonder why he did it? Would you ever take him back? And I answered honestly, no, no, never. Not because I'm heartless, not because I didn't love him, but because love without respect turns into self-erasure, and I had already erased myself enough. Daniel didn't fall apart because I refused to save him. He fell apart because for the first time in his life, he had to stand on his own. Some people mistake stability for boredom until they lose it. Some mistake kindness for weakness until it stops cushioning their choices. He was one of those people. I learned something else too, something harder to admit. Family betrayal doesn't always look like screaming or violence or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it looks like polite smiles, like raised glasses, like people deciding you're expendable because it's more convenient for them. Walking away wasn't revenge, it was alignment. The moment I stood up from that table and left with my dignity intact, that was the beginning. Everything else was paperwork. I'm 38 years old. I have my own place, my own peace, my own life again. And for the first time in a long time, I know where I end and where someone else begins. That boundary, that's not coldness, that's self-respect.